Hi, I'm Charlotte from youngandsensible.com, and today we're basically going to be finishing up the budgeting series that we've been going over. Um, and in this last video, we're going to be going over three sort of different budgeting philosophies or ways to budget out money to yourself. So obviously, for this point, it's assumed that you've taken the big step of making a budget for yourself. And I really suggest doing budgets month by month. If you're a college student, there's also some benefit to doing sort of an additional budget that is semester to semester, and that way if you're looking at sort of the expenses of tuition or housing, and if it's being paid sort of as you go, then that way you can sort of break down those fixed expenses month by month. But definitely in a monthly budget, there are certain things that are fixed, and then there are certain things that are more variable. So once you've gotten fixed budget into your monthly expenses, it can be really important how you deal with your more variable expenses. And I'm going to talk about three main ways that I've seen that sort of expensing done. And so the first of those three ways is allowances. And this is sort of where, after you look at your fixed expenses, you figure out how much you have per day or per week that's variable. And I personally am not a huge fan of this, doing it this way, just because I think that it is almost so flexible that it's too flexible, just because you don't set aside, well, like, I'm going to do this much for clothes or this much for food, and so it's not super helpful if you're trying to use a software site like mint.com. But that said, there are lots of people that sort of do it this way, and it is super flexible. I really like this way when I'm traveling, just because I'm not necessarily needing like tons of different categories. Probably the only three things I'm going to be paying for are like souvenirs, food, if I'm going to like a museum or an activity. And so me and Holly have definitely used this way traveling, and just saying that we're going to spend $30 a day each, or that's sort of like the maximum or something. So that's really helpful then, but it can be really helpful if you just need to be flexible and a budget is way too rigid for you. But just having sort of like a set amount of how much you might spend in a week that would be allowed lets you feel more comfortable with the budget. And that's opposed to the second way, which is a much more detailed allowance, and that's much more the way that I follow, and I do still have room for flexibility and changing around how much I can spend in each category each month. But it really gives me allowances in specific categories by using an Excel sheet and saying that this is how much I feel like I should spend on hair care this month. Or it just really allows me to be much more detailed in what I want to spend my money on. And so it's sort of like an allowance, but it's obviously much more detailed. And then the third way is not very rigorous either, but it's to look at your monthly budget and set saving aside first, and then to sort of from there just make sure that you don't overspend what you have left. I think that this is definitely a way to go if you don't need to be super tight in your budget. And I know that, I mean, my parents are great with money, and they don't have a super set budget. They pretty much make sure that they're putting away enough each month, and then my mom just tells my dad to tell her if she's overspending, and that really allows her to keep a healthy relationship with money, and to not be worrying about it. And so definitely, if you are in a position that you don't need to be really worried about money, or or just you know that you won't follow more of an allowance type schedule, then this definitely gives you the most wiggle room. So you can even sort of think about those different things as being more, I mean, in some way they're all an allowance, but being more like daily to weekly and not so categorized, or being daily to weekly and pretty categorized. And the lessons really just being sort of like a monthly allowance of how much you're not, a certain amount you're not going to go over because you need to set aside some for savings, and then there's not a lot more, and that's definitely a way to go too. So I hope this video has been helpful, and of course if any of you have questions about budgeting, I would love to answer them, or talk to you, and so you can send an email to us. There's contact information on the website. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in to this series, and I look forward to future money management series in the future. Okay.